The rain hammered down on the steel roof of Rodri Motors like 1,000 fists demanding entry. Clara Sterling stepped out of her Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR Pro, $3 million of carbon fiber and hybrid fury, and the engine died. Just stopped. No warning, no drama. Dead. 3 senior mechanics crowded around the hood, their faces lit by diagnostic screens flashing error codes they couldn't decipher. Clara's heels clicked against the concrete floor, sharp as gunshots. 3 of you, she said, her voice cold enough to frost glass, and not one can tell me why it won't start? A man stepped forward from the shadows. Tall, maybe 6'2", wearing coveralls stained with years of work. The garage owner cleared his throat. This is Ethan Miller. Started this morning. Used to be an aerospace engineer. Clara's eyes traveled from his calloused hands to his quiet face. She laughed, not warm, not kind. Then fix it. If you can fix this engine, I'll marry you. Deal? The other mechanics chuckled. Someone whistled. Clara's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Ethan looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Deal." The rain outside swallowed the sound of her laughter. Neither of them knew that word would change everything. Clara Sterling learned to build walls before she learned to build a company. Her father founded Sterling Logistics when she was 7 freight, shipping, supply chains that stretched across 3 continents. By the time she turned 25, she'd earned her MBA from Wharton and a reputation for being brilliant and untouchable. At 27, she married Daniel Rothschild. He came from old shipping money, the kind that bought politicians and silenced scandals. Their wedding made the cover of Forbes. The business community called it a merger made in heaven. 3 years later, she found him in her own office. His assistant on the desk, Clara had inherited from her grandfather. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She called her lawyer before she called her mother. The divorce played out in public like a execution. Daniel's family tried to paint her as cold, controlling, impossible to love. The tabloids ate it up. Ice Queen CEO loses her king ran in the New York Post beside a photo of her leaving the courthouse, her face a mask of marble. She won everything in the settlement. Everything except the ability to trust another human being. She threw herself into Sterling Logistics with the fury of someone drowning. Expanded into Southeast Asia, acquired 2 competitors, doubled revenue in 18 months. The board loved her. The employees feared her. She told herself that was enough. At night, alone in her penthouse, overlooking downtown Los Angeles, she'd stand at the window and wonder when the glass around her heart had stopped being a shield and started being a cage. Ethan Miller's story moved in the opposite direction from the sky to the ground, from precision engineering to grease under his fingernails. He met Sarah at Lockheed Martin. She worked in procurement. He designed hydraulic systems for fighter jets. They married young, bought a small house in Burbank, talked about having 3 kids and a dog. Lila came early, 2 months premature, with a heart that didn't quite work right. Ventricular septal defect, the doctors said. A hole between the chambers. Operable, but risky. They'd need to wait until she was stronger. Sarah hemorrhaged during delivery. They couldn't stop it. Ethan held his daughter for the first time in one arm and signed his wife's death certificate, with the other hand still shaking. He took a leave of absence from Lockheed, then another, then a permanent one. His supervisor called it a waste of potential. His accountant called it financial suicide. Ethan called it being a father. He found work at a small garage in Glendale. Then another in Pasadena. The money was a fraction of what he'd made before. But the hours were flexible. When Lila got sick, when her lips turned blue and her breathing went shallow, he could drop everything and run. He stopped dating, stopped going out, stopped being anything except Lila's dad. His old colleagues from Lockheed invited him to reunions. He never went. That life belonged to someone else now, someone who still believed the future was something you could engineer. His daughter was 7 years old and had been through 4 hospitalizations. She drew pictures of hearts with wings. She asked him every night if Mommy was watching from heaven. He always said yes, even though he'd stopped believing in anything he couldn't hold in his hands. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in North Hollywood. Lila got the bedroom. He slept on a futon in the living room. The walls were thin enough to hear her breathing through the night, the sound that told him she was still alive, still fighting, still his. 2 worlds. 2 people. Both convinced they'd used up their quota of happiness. Neither ready for what came next. The garage emptied out after midnight. The other mechanics gave up, shaking their heads at the Valkyrie like it was cursed. Clara left in an Uber, her phone already pressed to her ear, rearranging tomorrow's meetings around this disaster. Ethan stayed. He didn't do it for her. Didn't do it for the job. He stayed because the problem offended him. A $3 million machine. Defeated by something simple. Something fixable. Something everyone else had missed. He pulled off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. The Valkyrie's engine bay was a work of art. Carbon fiber, titanium. Every component optimized for weight and performance. Beautiful and complicated, and completely unforgiving of mistakes. He ignored the diagnostic computer. Ignored the error codes flashing on the screen. Instead, he traced the electrical system by hand, following each wire, checking each connection point with his fingers as much as his eyes. 40 minutes in, he found it. The ground wire on the ECU junction box had been connected to the wrong terminal positive instead of negative. A simple mistake, probably made during the last service. It created a feedback loop that scrambled the computer's brain. Made it think the engine was failing, when nothing was actually wrong. Someone had been careless. One wire, one connection, one moment of not paying attention. He fixed it with a socket wrench and 15 minutes of careful work. Reconnected the ground properly. Checked every other connection in the system to make sure nothing else was wrong. Then he closed the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and hit the start button. The V12 roared to life. Smooth, perfect, angry at having been silenced. Ethan let it run for 5 minutes, listening to the rhythm, watching the diagnostics stabilize. Then he shut it down, collected his tools, and walked out, without telling anyone. He didn't leave a note. Didn't ask for recognition. The job was done. That was enough. When Clara returned the next morning, the Valkyrie started on the first try. She stood there, hand on the door, staring at the dashboard like it had betrayed her by working. "Who fixed it?" she asked. The garage owner glanced at Ethan, who was already elbow-deep in a Honda Civic across the shop. Ethan shook his head once small, almost invisible. "Not sure," the owner lied smoothly. "One of the night crew must have figured it out." Clara's eyes found Ethan anyway. She watched him work for 30 seconds, the way his hands moved with absolute certainty, no wasted motion, no hesitation. This wasn't a man performing for an audience. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing, and didn't need anyone's approval. She felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction, not yet. Just recognition. The kind you feel when you see someone who operates by the same rules you do. Competence above everything, results over recognition, the work mattering more than the credit. She drove away without saying thank you, but she thought about him all morning. 3 days later, Clara invented a reason to come back. A noise in the steering column. A vibration in the brakes. Something she'd made up in the elevator before a board meeting. An excuse so thin it embarrassed her. She pulled into Rodri Motors, just after 2 p.m. The Valkyrie purred, like it had never been sick. She found Ethan in the back corner of the garage, sitting on an overturned bucket. On his lap, a little girl slept with her head against his chest. Her small hand curled into his shirt. Clara stopped walking. Stopped breathing. Almost. The girl stirred. Opened her eyes dark brown. Huge. Solemn. She looked at Clara for a long moment, then smiled. "I dreamed about you. You were a sad princess." The words hit Clara like a fist. She had a brother once. Had. Past tense. He'd died when she was 12. A heart defect no one caught in time. She'd spent years perfecting the art of not thinking about him. Ethan's hand was gentle on his daughter's back. "This is Lila. She's got a big imagination. And a big heart," Lila added seriously. "Too big. That's what the doctors say. It doesn't work right." Clara's throat closed. She managed, "What's wrong?" Ethan's voice was quiet. Factual. Ventricular septal defect. She was born with a hole in her heart. We're managing it. Waiting for her to be strong enough for surgery. He said it like he'd said it 1,000 times. Like the words had worn grooves in his mouth. Lila sat up, suddenly animated. But I'm okay. I can run for almost a whole minute now. Last year, I could only do 30 seconds. Clara found herself kneeling without deciding to. Eye level with this tiny girl who measured her life in heartbeats. That's really impressive. Dad says I'm the strongest person he knows. Lila grinned. And Clara saw Ethan in the shape of her smile, that same quiet confidence, that same refusal to be defeated by circumstances. Ethan checked his daughter's pulse against his watch, a habit, Clara realized, not a crisis. 30 seconds of counting, his fingers gentle on her wrist. His face relaxed. When he was satisfied, he let go, and Lila hopped down, already chattering about the motorcycle someone brought in that morning. Clara stood slowly. She'd spent 5 years training herself not to feel things. And this 7-year-old had cracked her open in under 5 minutes. Your car's fine, Ethan said. He wasn't looking at her, was watching Lila examine a tire with serious concentration. Nothing wrong with the steering or the brakes. Clara's face went hot. You thought you needed a reason to come back. His eyes met hers then, and they weren't unkind. Just knowing. You don't. For the first time in years, Clara Sterling didn't have a response prepared. It became a routine, though neither of them called it that. Clara started stopping by the garage during lunch. She'd bring coffee. Good coffee. The kind that cost $8 a cup, and pastries from the French bakery downtown. She told herself it was networking, building relationships, staying connected to real people instead of just boardrooms and balance sheets. She was lying, and she knew it. Ethan would take a break from whatever he was working on. They'd sit on the bench outside the garage, watching traffic flow past on Ventura Boulevard. Lila would color in a sketchbook between them, humming songs Clara didn't recognize. They talked about engines at first. Safe territory. Clara knew more about machinery than most people realized. Her father had made sure she understood every aspect of the business, including the trucks and ships that made it run. But the conversations drifted to movies they'd seen, books they'd read, the weird small failures of being human in a city that demanded perfection. One afternoon, Clara asked, "Does it scare you, raising her alone?" Ethan was quiet for a long time. Lila had fallen asleep against Clara's side, a development that had surprised them both. Finally, he said, "Every single day. But being scared and doing it anyway, that's not courage. That's just being a parent. That sounds like courage to me." He smiled, but it was sad around the edges. You can't be brave if you're not terrified first. That's what Sarah used to say. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife. Clara didn't push. Just sat there. This little girl breathing softly against her ribs. And listened when Ethan was ready to keep talking. "She made me promise," he said before she died. "Made me swear I'd give Lila a good life. Not a perfect one, she knew that was impossible, but a good one, full of love and safety, and people who gave a damn. You're doing that. Some days I'm not sure." He looked at his daughter, and his face did something complicated. "Some days, I think I'm just keeping her alive until I figure out what I'm actually supposed to do." Clara heard herself say, "Small things cause big failures." "You taught me that." He looked confused. "I never said that." "You did." "About the Valkyrie." The ground wire. Understanding dawned. "Right. One wrong connection. Whole system crashes. In engines," Clara said slowly. "And in hearts." The words hung there. Lila shifted in her sleep, her hand finding Clara's. Ethan's eyes were very steady on Clara's face. "Yeah," he said finally. "In hearts too." Later that week, Lila started calling Clara Miss Clara with the shiny shoes. It should have been silly. Instead, it felt like being given a name that mattered, like being seen by someone whose vision was unclouded by all the things adults used to lie to themselves. The The three of them fell into a shape that wasn't quite friendship, wasn't quite family, but was something real enough to scare Clara more than any business deal ever had. She was terrified of losing it. She had no idea how right she was to be afraid. The photographer's name was Marcus Chen, and he ran a gossip blog called Elite Exposed. He'd been tipped off by someone at Sterling Logistics, a mid-level manager with a grudge and an eye for scandal. He got the shot on a Tuesday afternoon. Clara, Ethan, and Lila sitting on that bench outside Rodri Motors, laughing at something Lila had said. The little girl was in the middle, holding both their hands. Clara's head was thrown back, caught mid-laugh, her face open in a way it never was in boardrooms. Ethan was looking at Clara, and his expression was unmistakable. The photo went live at 6 p.m. By 8 p.m., it was everywhere. Ice Queen CEO melts for blue-collar Romeo ran on Elite Exposed. TMZ picked it up within an hour. Then Page 6, then everyone. The comment section exploded. Half the internet thought it was sweet. A humanizing moment for a CEO who'd been portrayed as a robot in Prada. The other half called it a publicity stunt. A calculated move to soften her image before the quarterly earnings report. Clara's phone started ringing at 8:30 p.m. and didn't stop. Her publicist. Her lawyer. 3 different board members. Her mother, who led with, "What are you thinking?" and went downhill from there. At 10 p.m., the board called an emergency meeting. Clara sat in the Sterling Logistics conference room floor, to ceiling windows overlooking the city. A table that could seat 30 and faced 7 people who controlled her company's fate. Richard Moss, the chairman, didn't waste time. "This is a problem. It's a photo," Clara said. Her voice was steady. Everything inside her was not. "It's a narrative." Moss pulled up his tablet, started reading headlines. Here's Forbes. Sterling CEO's shocking romance. Bloomberg. Has Clara Sterling lost her edge? The Wall Street Journal's running an op-ed tomorrow, questioning your judgment. My judgment is fine. Then explain to me, said Patricia Winters, the CFO, why you're spending your lunch breaks at a garage in North Hollywood instead of here, managing a company in the middle of a critical expansion. Clara's jaw tightened. I'm allowed to have a personal life. Not one that makes stockholders nervous, Moss said. We've got institutional investors asking questions. 3 pension funds want reassurance that you're still focused. The Singapore deal is already on shaky ground. This doesn't help. Someone else chimed in about optics. Someone else about liability. The words blurred together, became a wall of sound that felt designed to smother her. Finally, Moss said, You need to make a statement. Tonight. Clarify that this is not a relationship, that your focus remains entirely on Sterling Logistics. Clara looked around the table. Faces she'd known for years. People she'd worked with, trusted, built something with. None of them were looking at her like she was a person, just an asset to be managed. And if I don't, then we'll be forced to consider whether you're still the right person to lead this company. Moss's voice was almost gentle. Almost. We're not trying to control your life, Clara. We're trying to protect the business your father built. Surely you understand that. She understood. Understood that power was conditional. Understood that the walls she'd built around herself weren't protection. They were a prison she'd been assigned to guard. At midnight, she stood in front of cameras for a press conference. Her hair was perfect. Her suit was perfect. Her voice was perfectly modulated, betraying nothing. I want to address the photos circulating today, she said. Rodri Motors services several of my vehicles. I've developed a professional relationship with the staff there. Any suggestion of a personal relationship is inaccurate. My focus remains entirely on Sterling Logistics and our continued growth. The words tasted like ash, like cowardice, like every other lie she'd ever told herself about what mattered. Somewhere across the city, Ethan was watching on TV. She knew it without having to check. Knew he'd hear those words. Any suggestion of a personal relationship is inaccurate, and understand exactly what she'd chosen. The cameras flashed. Clara smiled, and something in her chest, something that had just started to heal, closed back up tight. Ethan didn't watch the whole press conference. Got about 30 seconds in. Heard Clara's voice go flat, and corporate on the words professional relationship, and turned off the TV. Lila was already asleep. He sat in the dark of their apartment, his daughter's breathing the only sound, and felt something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Not anger. That would have been easier. This was disappointment, the kind that came from hoping when you knew better, from letting your guard down with someone who'd reminded you why you'd put it up in the first place. He'd known this would happen. Some part of him had known from the beginning. Clara Sterling lived in a different world, penthouses and board meetings and decisions made by committee. He lived in an apartment where the AC barely worked, and every dollar was budgeted 3 months in advance. The fairy tale where those worlds collided and everyone lived happily ever after? That was for movies. Real life was messier, meaner, governed by rules neither of them had made, but both had to follow. At 2 a.m., he opened his laptop and typed out a resignation letter. Kept it simple. Thank you for the opportunity. My last day will be Friday. He sent it before he could change his mind. Thursday morning, he showed up at Rodri Motors, like nothing had changed. Fixed a transmission, rotated tires on a Lexus, helped the new kid understand why you don't over-tighten oil filters. His hands did the work. His brain was somewhere else. Friday afternoon, he cleaned out his corner of the garage. He didn't have much. Some tools he'd brought from home, a thermos, a drawing Lila had made of the two of them standing next to a race car. He packed it all in a cardboard box. The owner found him around 4. You sure about this? Yeah. She hasn't been back since Tuesday. Ethan nodded. Hadn't expected her to. Not about her. Just time to move on. It was a lie, but a kind one. The owner clapped him on the shoulder and didn't push. Ethan drove home in his 13-year-old Toyota Tacoma, Lila singing along to the radio in the back seat, oblivious. She asked if they could get ice cream. He said yes, even though it wasn't in the budget. Some days, you needed ice cream more than you needed financial responsibility. That night, he tucked her in and she said, "Is Miss Clara coming back?" "I don't think so, sweetheart. Did we do something wrong?" His heart cracked. No. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes, people just have different lives. Lila thought about this seriously. That's sad. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. She fell asleep holding his hand. He stayed there until her grip loosened, then went to the living room and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. He didn't blame Clara. Didn't hate her. Just wished, for about 5 minutes, that he'd been someone different, someone who fit into her world, without requiring her to blow up her life. Then he got over it, because that's what you did. You got over things, and you kept going, because someone depended on you, and your feelings were a luxury you couldn't afford. He found a new job by Monday. A shop in Burbank, closer to home. The pay was slightly worse. He didn't care. Life continued, the way it always did. One day, then another, then another. He stopped checking his phone for messages that weren't coming. Clara went back to work, threw herself into the Singapore expansion with the intensity of someone trying to outrun her own thoughts. Worked 16-hour days. Slept in her office more than her apartment. The business thrived. Stock prices climbed. The board was pleased. She felt nothing, which was fine. Nothing was safe. Nothing was predictable. Nothing couldn't hurt you. 3 weeks passed like this. Then her phone rang at 1:47 a.m. on a Wednesday night. She was still at the office, reviewing contracts, and almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Probably spam. But something made her pick up. Miss Sterling? A woman's voice. Professional. Carefully neutral. This is Allison from Children's Hospital Los Angeles. I'm calling about Lila Miller. Clara's entire body went cold. What happened? She was admitted to the ICU about an hour ago. Her father listed you as an emergency contact. Can you come? Clara was already moving. Grabbing her keys, her phone, not bothering with her coat. I'm on my way. She made it to the hospital in 12 minutes. parked illegally, and didn't care. Ran through the lobby to the elevators. Punched the button for the cardiac ICU floor 7 times, like it would make the elevator faster. The doors opened on the 4th floor. Sterile white hallways. The smell of antiseptic and fear. She found Ethan sitting outside the ICU, slumped in a plastic chair. His hair was a mess. His eyes were hollowed out. In his hands, he held what looked like a technical drawing, mechanical, precise, covered in numbers. He looked up when she approached. For a second, she saw relief break across his face before he locked it down again. What happened? Clara sat down next to him. Didn't ask permission. Just Saturday. His voice was raw. She collapsed at school. They called 911. Her heart's failing, Clara. They're saying she needs surgery now. Not in 6 months. Not when she's stronger. Now. Okay. Clara's brain shifted into the mode it knew best. Problem solving. Action. Results. What do they need? A miracle. He laughed. But it was broken. Or, $200,000 I don't have. The surgery's not fully covered by insurance. They'll do it anyway, but I'll be paying it off for the rest of my life. And that's if everything goes perfect. Clara pulled out her phone. What are you doing? Calling the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in California. He owes me a favor. Clara, don't. She looked at him, and her voice was steel. Don't tell me not to help. Don't tell me it's too much. I have money sitting in accounts, doing nothing but making more money. Let me use it for something that actually matters. Ethan's eyes were bright, and she realized he was about to cry. So was she. I'm sorry, he said. For leaving. For not calling. I know what you thought. Her hand found his. You thought I chose them over you. And I did. Because I was scared. But I'm not that woman anymore. I don't want to be her. He squeezed her hand. What do you want? This. She gestured at the horrible hallway, the waiting room that smelled like despair, the life or death uncertainty that had brought them back together. I want this, the messy, terrifying, real thing. Whatever that looks like. Before he could answer, a doctor appeared. They both stood. Mr. Miller, we're ready to take Lila into surgery. Ethan nodded, followed the doctor to a window that looked into the ICU. Clara went with him. Through the glass, she could see Lila tiny in a hospital gown, surrounded by machines, but awake. When she saw her father, she waved. A small, brave wave that destroyed them both. Ethan pressed his hand to the glass. Lila pressed hers to the other side, matching him. Clara put her hand over Ethan's, and they stood there, 3 hands layered against the glass, while the machines beeped and the fluorescent lights hummed and everything that mattered in the world fit into that moment. The surgery took 6 hours. Clara made phone calls. Arranged for Dr. Raymond Chen, the best in his field, to consult. Authorized payment for anything they needed. Called in favors from hospital board members she'd helped with logistics contracts. Ethan. Just Saturday. Sometimes he'd look at that drawing. Clara finally saw it was a design for a mechanical heart valve, something he'd sketched as a backup plan. As if he could engineer a solution to save his daughter himself. Neither of them left. Neither of them ate. They just existed in that waiting room, time stretching and compressing in the strange way it does when you're terrified. At 7:42 a.m., Dr. Chen came through the double doors. He pulled off his surgical cap, and his face gave nothing away until he smiled. The surgery was successful. We repaired the defect and reinforced the surrounding tissue. Barring complications, Lila should make a full recovery. Ethan made a sound. Clara had never heard before. Relief and grief and joy, all compressed into one exhale. He bent forward, hands on his knees, and his shoulders shook. Clara's own tears came fast and hot. She put her hand on Ethan's back, felt him shaking, and let herself shake with him. Dr. Chen, professional to the end, said, "You can see her in about an hour. She'll be groggy, but she'll know you're there." When the doctor left, Clara and Ethan sat back down. He turned to her, and his face was streaked with tears. And he didn't try to hide it. "Thank you," he said. "I don't know how to." "You don't have to." "I do. You saved her life." "You saved mine first," Clara said. "You just did it so quietly. I almost missed it." He laughed, then started crying again. So did she. They sat there in that waiting room, crying like people who'd forgotten how. And it was the most honest either of them had been in years. Finally, Clara said, "I don't want to go back to that life. The board meetings and the appearances. And pretending I'm not a person. What do you want?" She looked at him. At this man who'd fixed her car and her heart with the same patient hands. "I want to fix things. Real things. With you." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. And it was the first real smile she'd seen from him in weeks. "Then let's fix what's broken," he said. "Together." Through the window, the sun was rising over Los Angeles, pink and gold, and full of unlikely promises. Clara watched it climb, and felt something in her chest that had been closed for years finally, carefully, open back up. They went in to see Lila at 8:30. She was pale but awake, tubes running from her arms, monitors tracking her heartbeat. When she saw them, she smiled. "Did they fix me?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan took her hand. "Yeah, sweetheart. You're going to be okay." Lila looked at Clara. "Are you going to stay?" Clara felt Ethan's eyes on her, felt the weight of the choice, the way it would reshape everything. "Yeah," she said. "I'm staying." Lila's smile got bigger. Then she closed her eyes and went back to sleep, her heart beating steady and strong on the monitor beside her. Clara and Ethan stood on either side of the bed, watching her breathe, and neither of them said what they were both thinking, that this was the beginning of something none of them knew how to name yet, but all of them desperately needed. 6 months later, the headlines were different. Former Sterling CEO launches nonprofit garage for second chances. Clara had resigned from Sterling Logistics in March. The board tried to talk her out of it, offered raises and concessions, and promises of flexibility. She thanked them, and left. Anyway, with Ethan, she'd founded Phoenix Garage in a warehouse space in East LA. The name came from Lila, who'd drawn a picture of a bird rising from car parts and said, "Like you and Dad." The concept was simple. Teach automotive skills to people who needed a second chance. Ex-convicts, single mothers, kids who dropped out of high school, anyone willing to work hard and learn something real. Clara handled the business side, fundraising, partnerships, grants. She was good at it. Better than she'd been at running Sterling Logistics, because now she actually believed in what she was building. Ethan taught. He was patient, thorough, the kind of instructor who never made you feel stupid for not knowing something. Students who'd been failed by every system they'd encountered found themselves succeeding under his guidance. Lila became the garage's unofficial mascot. She'd recovered fully from the surgery. Could run for 5 minutes now without getting winded. She'd greet students at the door, show them her scar, tell them about hearts that didn't work right but kept beating anyway. The walls were painted industrial gray. The floors were stained with oil that wouldn't come out. Above the main workstation, someone had welded a metal sign. "Fix engines, fix lives." They weren't making millions, weren't getting written up in Forbes, but they were making a difference, one person at a time. And Clara discovered that mattered more than anything she'd done in a corner office. She learned to get her hands dirty, literally. Learned to change oil and replace brake pads and diagnose problems by sound. She was terrible at it, clumsy and slow, and constantly asking Ethan for help, but she kept trying. One evening, after the students had left, she stood in the garage, looking at the hydraulic lift, the tool chests, the cars in various states of repair. Her clothes were covered in grease. Her manicure was destroyed. Her hair was in a ponytail that had given up hours ago. She felt more herself than she had in 10 years. Ethan found her there. Lila was already asleep in the office, curled up on a couch they'd bought at a thrift store. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She smiled. "I'm good." He moved closer, and she leaned into him, his arms solid around her shoulders. They stood like that for a while, watching dust motes drift through the light, listening to the distant sound of traffic on Sunset Boulevard. "Thank you," she said eventually, "for letting me be part of this. You are this. I couldn't do it without you. We balance each other." "Yeah," he said. "We do." It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. Wasn't a declaration or a dramatic moment. Just two people acknowledging the thing they'd built together, something stronger than passion, more reliable than romance. Love that showed up in coveralls and kept its promises. The 1-year anniversary of Phoenix Garage fell on a Saturday. They threw a party, students past and present, donors, local business owners who'd supported them. Someone brought a cake. Someone else brought a keg. Lila wore a dress covered in sequins and told everyone who'd listen about the time she almost died but didn't. Clara stood at the front of the garage, holding something small and metallic. She'd been dreading this moment all week, but now that it was here, she felt calm. "A year ago," she said, and the crowd quieted down. "I stood in a different garage and said something cruel. I said, 'Fix this engine, and I'll marry you. Deal.' A few people laughed. Most just listened. I was mocking someone I thought was beneath me. Someone I didn't know, didn't value, didn't understand." She held up the object, a spark plug from the Aston Martin Valkyrie, the one Ethan had replaced that night. "This is from that engine. The one I thought no one could fix." She looked at Ethan, who was standing off to the side with Lila on his shoulders. "He didn't just fix my car," Clara said. "He fixed me. Reminded me what it means to build something with your hands, to show up for people, to love without conditions or contracts." She walked over to him. Lila giggled, sensing something big was about to happen. Clara pulled out a ring from her pocket, simple silver, designed by a jewelry student at the community college, shaped like a gear. Nothing like the massive diamond she'd worn during her first marriage. "You fixed mine too," Ethan said quietly, and she realized he'd planned this as well, because he had his own ring, a matching gear, slightly larger. They exchanged them there, in front of everyone. No officiant, no ceremony. Just two people who'd learned the hard way that the best things in life weren't clean or simple or easy. But they were worth showing up for every single day. Lila cheered. The crowd erupted. Someone cranked up music, and the party shifted into something bigger, louder, more celebratory. Later, after most people had left, Clara, Ethan, and Lila stood in the empty garage. Above them, someone had hung a banner. "Fixed with love, Clara, Ethan, and Lila." Lila stood between them, holding both their hands. "Are we a family now?" "We've been a family for a while," Ethan said. "We're just making it official." "Good," Lila said, satisfied. Then, with the abrupt pivot of a 7-year-old, "Can we get a dog?" Clara and Ethan looked at each other. After everything, the heartbreak, the surgery, the rebuilding, this was the question that made them both laugh. "Maybe," Clara said. "Definitely," Ethan countered. They locked up the garage together, turned off the lights, and walked out into the warm Los Angeles night. The neon sign above the door, a phoenix rising from a pile of gears, cast red and orange light across the sidewalk. Behind them, engines waited to be fixed. Lives waited to be rebuilt. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new challenges, new people who needed second chances. But tonight, they were just three people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided that broken things could be beautiful if you were willing to do the work. They drove home in Ethan's truck, Lila asleep between them, Clara's hand on Ethan's knee. And everything that mattered fit perfectly in that moment, imperfect, hard-won, and absolutely real.